Hi, this is another video I'm doing here, which is about part two. I mean, I've tended in the other two videos I've done prior to this, focused mainly on part one. Part three, which is about your reflections on a particular situation, is quite diverse. And as I've mentioned about part three does not have to be anything serious like a mental illness. We're not looking at, trying to talk about your relationship with your friend who's got, dissociative identity disorder or bipolar disorder. You can do that if you like, if that's the experiences you've had, if you think that's important to you. Brilliant. It can be something very, very small, as I've said in the lectures many times. It could be, relationships with partners, relationships with children, fractious relationships there. May you, deal with those better. It could be, interactions with clients, customers, colleagues, could be, a reflection on a specific instance you had where you had an argument with this hypothetical boiler man who came round to fix your boiler and you ended up doing a bad job, so you thought, and you ended up arguing with him and it all went really nasty. Again, thinking about that, thinking about how you could have been different, blah, blah, blah. And then trying to analyse that and put it into an action plan. And remember, the action plan is a set of fairly concrete steps. It can be difficult to follow, so you're trying to make it easy as you can to follow those steps. Action plan could be something really unachievable. So we're trying to make it relatively achievable, measurable, all those things, SMART, whatever that stands for, specific, measurable, achievable, is it realistic and time limited? Your action plan should be something which you can reasonably follow, and rather than being some out there thing where you've got no chance of achieving it. But part two is the one I want to focus on today, because I think I was reflecting a lot after the sessions that I did about exactly what the purpose of reflection is there. Now remember, the purpose of reflection is all about you. I mean, it's you involving other people, of course it is, but it's ultimately about you, because that's the only bit you can change. You couldn't, a part of reflection is not to say if this person had done this, then that would be much better. If person C had turned up, then things would have been utterly fantastic, but person C didn't turn up. Well, yeah, but you cannot wish for other people's behaviour to change. You cannot wish for an ideal world. The only thing you can do is to change your own behaviour. So that's what you need to think about. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't reflect on the performance of other people. Now, obviously, we don't want to vent, we don't want to anonymise, blah, 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 but you could think about how you may have done something differently in future, given what happened. So let's just take a simple example of whereby you get in a presentation, everybody's presenting their own slides. The night before the presentation, everybody's going to come in, bring their own stuff together. Person C emails everybody going, "Oh, I'm really sorry, I'm sick," or they just don't turn up. Now, there's a great opportunity to vent, isn't there? Person C spoiled my, what would have been a crowning achievement of my life. They didn't turn up. The presentation was terrible. We completely messed up. What an idiot. Person C should be ashamed, whatever. That's not helpful. Well, yeah, I mean, it's perfectly helpful, but don't do that in private. Get a punch bag and release. That's not necessarily a good thing either. But vent in private, or vent to your mates. Don't vent in an assessment. But what you could think about in that particular situation is there anything that I could have done to try and ensure that we weren't in such a pickle next time? Well, quite clearly I couldn't have changed person C's personality, or I couldn't have prevented person C from getting the infectious disease or whatever. But what we could have done is something relatively straightforward. The learning experiences when we have everything in a shared site, so everybody's working together and everybody knows maybe each other's parts. Maybe that's a sensible thing to do. So if somebody does bail out, somebody else can step in. We've almost, everybody's almost, if you like, understudying everybody else as well as knowing their own part. So that might be a thing that you might think about. That might be an action plan, right? But at the same time, you might think, well, maybe that's too much. This is not actually assessed. The presentation isn't assessed. There's plenty of other things to be getting on with, as well as a life, as a job, or whatever else you're doing. So maybe that would be too much. So part of the reflection, say, well, actually, of course, in an ideal world, we could have all learned each other's parts, and if somebody bailed out, but ultimately that would have meant us putting a lot of individual effort in, and the chances that person C wouldn't bail out. So it's a consideration. It's trying to find what is a reasonable thing that you could do in order to try and alleviate that as far as possible. Yeah. So, and that's it. You know, it's reflecting isn't just about saying in an ideal world. That's no good because we don't live in an ideal world. You know, expecting an ideal world completely makes the reflection pointless. So it's got to be the real world. It's got to be the real world in which you've got a family to go home to, in which you've got a job to do, in which you've got essays on other modules to do, and so on. So, is it realistic? No, but is there some halfway measure we could have done to have that problem? I think I've mentioned to a few people, when I was thinking about the presentations, I was thinking about my own experience when I did a little gig. Me and one of the lecturers did a gig, played guitar in Hartley campus a month or so ago, and I think one of the problems with that is that I was focusing a lot on my performance and he was focusing a lot on his performance. And when we did the performance, there was a line that we practiced a song that we practiced a few times together. And I finished the song, and he carried on. And I kind of looked at him, and he kind of looked back at me, kind of smiling. And I said to him, you know, I think this is the point that we finish, isn't it? And he just carried on and then just stopped. And I was pretty angry, as you might imagine. I mean, unfortunately, I wasn't very angry, but I was pretty annoyed because he kind of had finished the song, and he'd just been doing going on. And it's very easy in that situation to say you ruined it, or he ruined it, or whatever. And the same in a presentation where somebody doesn't do their bit very well, or somebody can't control the slides properly, or whatever. Or we could just blame the other person because absolutely nothing to do with me. But then you might say, well, is there anything I could have done in that situation which may have helped him? Because obviously when you're doing a presentation, you're judged by the totality of the efforts. It doesn't matter how stonking you are if the other guy is making a complete mess of it, if the other guy's out of tune, or if the other guy loses the thread of the presentation, or just talks gibberish or something like that. So rather than blame, they may say, well, obviously I can't change their behaviour, but maybe we could have had rehearsals. Is that a reasonable thing to do? Maybe we could have practiced that a bit more. Maybe I could have done something to help make this person's life easier, or improve their performance. But again, you've got to say, this is a reasonable, is this reasonable given the amount of time we've got available, given the amount of effort we can put into this? Because what you mustn't do, really, in many situations, and there may be a few exceptions, is what you mustn't do is become responsible for everybody. Everybody has to adopt their own responsibility. But maybe you could, as an individual, make that clear that you're responsible for this. You know, role confusion may be a problem. You know, nobody quite knew what they were supposed to be doing. So are there any things that you could reasonably, without beating yourself up or burning yourself out, could have done to help some of these other people do it? So I think that's an important issue. It is about you, what you can do, but sometimes what you can do is to help other people. But ultimately you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And let's continually be realistic. I mean, one of the students said to me the other day that she wished she'd been a bit more forceful during the discussions, the preliminary discussions, and been a bit more directive. Instead she sat back. I said, well, why did you sit back? She said, well, I didn't want to make anybody angry. And then she could say, well, actually that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Some people may feel that the right thing to do is be more forceful and end up with a better presentation. But I perfectly see an argument to say, do you know what, this is a presentation which isn't actually assessed. It doesn't really matter if we mess up, apart from it's a bit embarrassing. But what I don't want to do is to make enemies of people because I'm seen as being aggressive or domineering. Because I've got to get on with these people, I've got to do other modules. I'm doing other modules with them. I want some of them are my friends. I don't want to lose friends over a presentation. You know, again, perfectly valid conclusion. That's again, would you do something differently? Well, maybe there are different ways in which you could have done that. There may be ways in which somebody could be more forceful, a bit more directive, without angering anybody. Maybe again, that's the way that people think, isn't it? There's this bi-directional thinking. Well, I should have been more forceful, which would have maybe come across as being aggressive. Or I can sit back. Right, now we've got whatever you see two alternatives, really always think, in anything, is there a third, is there a fourth, is there a fifth? Because it may be that there is another way of doing it. You know, you don't simply say, you know, start shouting at them and making them angry. You can be forceful in other ways. So that, again, is something to reflect upon. So consider it all in its context. Don't do this to please me. Don't do this to kind of marry the words that I think I want you to marry. This is about you picking experiences that you're important, thinking about yourself, the little bits you may want to change, trying to put that into practice, and considering, you know, all these alternatives. Is there time to do it? Is there energy? Do you have the energy to do it? Do you want people angry? And so on. Okay, thank you.